as it should be.
Hello and welcome. You're watching the Trump Card here on News 9. I am Krishna Kumar. Continuing his economic onslaught, US President Donald Trump has once again turned up the heat on global trade. Trump reiterated that the US is planning to announce a quote-unquote major tariff on pharmaceuticals or drugs imports, a move that could rattle India's pharma industry. So how could India be impacted? Well, the US is India's largest export market for pharmaceutical goods. In the financial year 2024 alone, India exported nearly $28 billion worth of pharma products, and out of that, a massive $8.7 billion went to the US, more than 30%, and that's according to the Pharmaceuticals Export Promotion Council of India. Moreover, India supplies over 45% of America's generic drugs and around 15% of its biosimilars. Industry heavyweights like Dr. Reddy's, Aurobindo Pharma, Zydus, Sun Pharma and Gland Pharma earn anywhere between 30 to 50% of their revenues from the US market. Experts have warned that slapping tariffs on these imports will not just hurt India, it could affect the US as well. It will drive up manufacturing costs of drugs and make essential medicines more expensive and out of reach of the American consumers.
We're going to tariff our pharmaceuticals, and once we do that, they're going to come rushing back into our country because we're the big market. The advantage we have over everybody is that we're the big market. So we're going to be announcing very shortly a major tariff on pharmaceuticals.
So that means a tariff war is also to brew in the pharma sector. More importantly, how will India's drug giants respond? We have a couple of very special guests joining us on this show. We have Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador to WTO, joining us. Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to begin by asking, when the tariffs across the world, when he hiked tariffs across the world, the big question was, will pharmaceuticals be excluded from it? Even at that point, he had hinted that there will be tariffs coming on the pharma sector, and it looks like that's going to be a reality sooner than we thought.
Well, the US government directly and indirectly spends a lot of money on pharmaceuticals because the Medicare, the Medicaid, and the US Veterans Administration, for instance, they all have budgetary support from the US for pharmaceuticals. The second aspect is that pharmaceuticals, most of the middle class people in the US are covered under different health insurance schemes. So if the cost of pharmaceuticals goes up, the health insurance premium, which form a very substantial part of the incomes of people, especially the middle and the lower middle income people, they will all have to dole out more by way of their insurance premium. And it's going to put a very substantial burden on people. So this is going to have a definite backlash. That is one thing about the US consumers. The second point is that India charges only about 10% of American pharmaceuticals and others on MFN basis which come into India. Whereas the US charges very little. I think it is in the range of 2% or so. If other countries export pharmaceuticals to the US. So the difference is not very high. And if he's going to do it sectorally, there could be a case for having some 5-6% or maybe 10% at the most duty import tariff imposed on India and others. The others, of course, would vary because whereas India is going to pay only 26% on all items barring pharmaceuticals, the others have been put in different brackets, 54% for and plus
Right.
50% now for China, etc.
Right.
Now, the point that I'm making is that the US is dependent on India for generics and hugely on China for APIs. So if it puts a ban, I mean, not a ban really, but in the case of China, of course, it will amount to kind of a ban, but it will have no other option but to import from India in the short and medium term.
Right. It will have no other option but to import from India. Jayant Gupta, just stay with us. We have Dr. Y.K. Gupta, President, AIMS, Jammu, and renowned pharmacologist now joining us. Dr. Y.K. Gupta, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on News9. These new tariffs that Trump is set to announce, in fact, about high tariffs on pharmaceuticals, it will impact Indian companies. Indian companies will have no option but to raise prices and pass it on to the consumers in the US, and that will lead to, it will affect the American public the most.
Yes, I think the issue is not so simple. The Donald Trump has imposed the tariff, are thinking of imposing the tariff because they think that the domestic pharmaceutical production in US is much less, and therefore they want to incentivize the production in US. And one way that Trump thinks that it increase the tariff. Now, how it will impact the India? In India, it is if you just see that today, 4 drugs out of 10, that means every 2 out of 5 in prescription drugs in US is from India generics. That means a huge chunk. And if I see 45% of the generics and 15% of the biosimilars are from India. The US is buying from India because of the 2 reasons. The competitiveness means they are much cheaper than the comparative import from other places, except China or maybe some other places. But also important thing is the quality and the trust which the Indian pharmaceuticals give to them. If they increase the tariff, this will result into 2 things. This will result into the increase in the production cost, but more importantly, the thinning down or reduction in the margin of the profit which the pharmaceutical industry is expected to earn. This will be difficult for those pharmaceutical companies which are running already on thin profit. And therefore, what will happen? Either drug companies, Indian drug companies, reduce the margin of the profit. That's why the apprehension, and that's why you can see the share prices are going down. Or the alternative thing is the increase in the cost of acquisition for the pharmaceutical products by the US consumer. So what will happen?
Right.
The US consumer is likely to get expensive medicine. The Indian pharma industry will get lesser margin, and therefore this will affect both. And I will just say one thing.
Right.
Indian pharmaceutical industry is a very resilient. It
Fair
is
enough.
trusted quality.
Fair enough.
And
Fair enough. India's pharma industry is resilient and is not just importing to the US; it imports to across the world. 1/3 of it, of its exports, go to the US. Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, it was the question raised on hiking tariffs on pharmaceuticals and drugs was on humanitarian grounds. It is not a tariff to be levied. It's not a bargaining chip on the table, but it's something that's essential, and that's where Trump feels that all the drugs supplied in the US are charged at levels unheard of in other countries in the world, and he wants to protect his claim is that he wants to protect the Indian the American consumers. But the fact of the matter is that with India supplying a huge chunk of the generics drugs, the common drugs to the American public, this will make things more difficult for the public over there.
That is, of course, absolutely correct. The other point which I wanted to mention is that India has the maximum number of FDA approvals for manufacture of drugs, which are required in order to import into the US. So it is not likely that India can be substituted all that easily by some other manufacturer in some other part of the world. So that is a kind of dependence of the US on India, and of course the APIs which the China mainly supplies are exported in huge quantities and volumes. So that can still go on, provided China can sustain this tariff of 104%. So I don't see really that the US has much of an option. If it raises the tariffs, it will be passed on in large measure to the consumers in the US, and the Indian companies may reduce their profit margins a little bit. Having said that, many of the Indian companies, 30 to 40% of their profits are coming from sales to the US market, because it is about $8.7 billion worth of exports that we have made annually. And another thing which needs to be mentioned very clearly for our viewers is that India in 2022 alone, by supplying generic medicines at very reasonable rates, led to a savings of about $219 billion for the US consumer. And between 2013 and 2022, the total savings amounted to about $1.3 trillion. And in the next 5 years, if the US continues to charge little or next to little import tariffs, it's going to lead to another savings of $1.3 trillion in the next 5 years. So these are figures that the administration, US administration, I'm sure would be grappling with. And another thing which came to the fore during the COVID crisis is that it's not all that easy to set up a manufacturing facility at any place in a jiffy. It takes time, investment, of course, and a lot of infrastructure. And the second thing is, there is no certainty that these tariffs will continue forever. So the investor will look at all kinds of options.
Wait, Dr. YK Gupta, there are also Indian pharma companies which have operations in the US, formulations to API. How do you think this will impact those companies and their operations in the US?
Absolutely right. There are a couple of companies like Reddy's lab, like Aurobindo, and maybe even Sun Pharma, Gland Pharma. They have their manufacturing units in US. But that does not mean that the Indian export, they are not doing it. And if you just see the Aurobindo Pharma, the Dr. Reddy's there, and the Zydus, their major profit comes from the generics which are exported to them. So there are two things. One is those who have already in manufacturing plants in US will try to improve or increase the size of their companies. The other companies may also try to put their investment to pharmaceutical manufacturing in US. But as my colleague has rightly said, that setting up of the formulation plant is not till a switch on and off. It takes some time. You need an expertise. You require an investment. You require a lot of inspection by the US FDA, and that will take a few years, maybe 2 or 3 years minimum. And by that time, the tariff will also be reasonably or ultimately be passed on to the US consumer.
Right.
I think it will affect to the US consumer, which will adversely affect on the affordability. Sometimes such increase in the price all of a sudden reduce the availability also. So affordability as well as availability, sometimes shortage of drugs. These are the possible things which the Trump administration will have to consider very, very carefully. Okay. In India, I am very sure that the Indian market will absorb to a certain extent, will not die because of the smaller profit, but definitely some profit margin will reduce, and therefore that reaction which you see in the share market is, I think, overreaction, and maybe it will come back.
Okay. You're saying it's an overreaction, but pharma stocks have been taking a beating in the Indian stock markets for a while now, not just with the announcement of a possible hike, possible major tariffs on pharma imports into the US. But for now, we leave it at that. Ambassador Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador to WTO, and Dr. Y.K. Gupta, President, AIMS, Jammu, and renowned pharmacologist. Thank you both of you for taking time out to be with us here on the Trump Card on News9. And with that, we take a very short breather. We'll be back with lots more. Keep it with the Trump Card on News9.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9, English news as it should be.
In the age of OTT platforms, to watch or not to watch, that's the question. Because you are what you watch. It's our review, but your choice to skip it or stream it. Hello and welcome. I'm Krishna Kumar. This is Skip It, Stream It.
आपके वक़्फ़ में एक भी नॉन मुस्लिम नहीं आएगा.
Waqf bill was passed by Rajya Sabha. Opposition parties had challenged the legislation in the Supreme Court. Can Mohammad Yunus be trusted because he met Prime Minister Modi? West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee met thousands of teachers and educators. Tharoor said that it took 21 months for Bharatiya Janata Party to impose president rule in the state.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9, English news as it should be.
You're watching the Trump Card. I am Krishna Kumar. US President Donald Trump lashed out, mocking world leaders and rebelled Republicans amidst escalating trade tensions. At an event, Trump claimed that countries were, quote unquote, calling up and kissing my A star, that's all I can say on air at this stage, to make a trade deal, and dismissed critics suggesting that the US Congress should lead negotiations. The remarks came just hours before sweeping new US tariffs on Chinese imports rising to 104% officially took effect. Now, Asian stock markets took another hit on Wednesday as stocks tumbled across the board after US President Trump announced plans to impose tariffs totaling a staggering 104% on Chinese goods, reigniting fears of more trade wars in the offing. Oil prices also plunged nearly 4% as investors' jitters over a possible global recession intensified. This report tells you more.
Stocks plunged again on Wednesday morning after Washington confirmed it would hit China with tariffs totaling 104%. That's a response to Beijing putting its own retaliatory tariffs on US goods. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Donald Trump was going to escalate.
It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect.
Japan's Nikkei index tumbled 3% from the open following the news. Hong Kong's Hang Seng index then opened with similar losses. Oil prices also tumbled, falling nearly 4% in Asian trade amid mounting fears of a global recession. That all followed another day of tumult on Wall Street. US stocks initially soared Tuesday on hopes that trade deals were in the offing. Then they plunged back into the red following the China news. The benchmark S&P 500 index fell over 1.5%. It has now seen over $5.8 trillion in losses, marking the worst four-day decline since the index was created in the 1950s. Now the US says talks are scheduled with Japan and South Korea, but officials say they will not prioritize negotiations with China. Beijing in turn has vowed to fight to the end, saying it will not give in to what it calls US blackmail. Speaking late on Tuesday, Trump himself turned up the temperature again, dashing hopes that drug makers would keep their current exemption.
We're going to tariff our pharmaceuticals, and once we do that, they're going to come rushing back into our country because we're the big market. The advantage we have over everybody is that we're the big market. So we're going to be announcing very shortly a major tariff on pharmaceuticals.
Now markets wait to see what US trading partners do next, as his reciprocal tariffs on countries around the world kick in. The EU is widely expected to announce retaliatory levies on American goods ranging from soybeans to sausages.
Now, China has once again hit back by announcing that it will slap a 34% additional tariff on all US imports effective from the 10th of April. The move, confirmed by China's Customs Tariff Commission, comes in direct response to what it calls Washington's unilateral bullying and violation of international trade norms. Remember, US President Trump had signed an executive order imposing what he called reciprocal tariffs, introducing a 10% baseline duty that came into effect on Saturday. Now, the Trump administration has threatened an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods, pushing the total tariff rate to a staggering 104%. Meanwhile, South Korea is stepping in to support its auto industry amidst fresh economic uncertainties. Seoul announced a package of emergency support measures aimed at softening the blow of Donald Trump's new tariffs, a move that could majorly hit one of Korea's most export-reliant sectors.
South Korea is stepping in with emergency aid for its automakers as a global trade war escalates. Seoul said Wednesday that it would provide financial support for the industry and offer tax cuts and subsidies to boost domestic demand. US President Donald Trump has imposed a 25% levy on US imports of cars starting from Thursday.
So we'll effectively be charging a 25% tariff, but if you build your car in the United States, there is no tariff.
The South Korean government says its car makers look particularly vulnerable as a result, as they don't make many cars in the US. Officials said it was hard to put a number on how much damage would be done. Among the new measures, the government will provide over $10 billion in financial support for the industry. Taxes on automobile purchases will be cut from 5% to 3.5% until June, and subsidies for electric vehicles will also be increased. The government said it would also seek to aid automakers in efforts to raise sales in developing nations. Regarding Trump's tariffs, officials said they would seek to negotiate a solution. Last year, South Korea's automobile shipments to the US totaled almost $35 billion, or about half of the country's total auto exports. Hyundai Motor said last week that it would try to keep prices unchanged in the US despite the tariffs. Shares in the firm were down around 0.5% by early afternoon Wednesday, beating the 1.5% decline for South Korea's benchmark Kospi stock index.
Meanwhile, Vietnam and Spain are drawing closer as both countries face rising trade pressure from the US due to tariffs by Trump, and Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh and his Spanish counterpart Pedro Sanchez vowed to strengthen economic and defense cooperation in a meeting in Hanoi in Vietnam, and jointly backed the need to uphold free trade in the world. The talks come just as new US tariffs take effect, 46% on Vietnamese goods and 25% on EU or European Union products, a move both leaders say could harm global trade and growth. Vietnam also expressed interest in upgrading ties with Spain to a comprehensive strategic partnership, while Spain indicated that it wants to deepen investments, particularly in railway infrastructure in Vietnam. Remember, it marks the first visit by a Spanish Prime Minister to Vietnam since the countries established diplomatic relations back in the year 1977. Meanwhile, factory workers in Vietnam are voicing growing fears about job security as the latest round of US tariffs take effect. President Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs kicking in, hitting dozens of countries, including that 46% levy on Vietnamese exports, with exports making up 30% of Vietnam's GDP, and a trade surplus with the US of over $120 billion last year. Vietnam is under pressure to shield its economy from a further fallout. Hopes that wealthy American consumers might help lift the struggling $400 billion luxury industry are quickly fading. Growing fears that President Trump's renewed tariff blitz could push the global economy into recession are putting pressure on the sector, already in the grip of its worst slump in years. Take a look at this.
Luxury brands have endured their biggest slump in years. There was some hope wealthy Americans might pull the $400 billion a year industry out of its current lull. But fears have grown President Trump's tariff blitz will plunge the world into recession and hit the luxury sector. One Wall Street analyst now expects worldwide sales of luxury goods will fall by as much as 2% this year. That's down from a previous forecast for 5% growth. If it proves accurate, it would mark the industry's longest downturn in more than 2 decades. Trump's tariffs were more sweeping than many market players feared and led to retaliation from China. Shares in luxury sector leader LVMH are down 2% since the start of the year, while Gucci owner Kering has dropped close to a third, and Hermes and Cartier owner Richemont have also sunk. All eyes will be on LVMH when it kicks off first quarter financial reports on April 15th. Key rivals follow soon after with their own numbers. LVMH's Louis Vuitton had hoped sales growth from wealthy Americans would help offset weak demand in China. But signs of weakness emerged even before Trump's tariffs. Citi data released Tuesday showed US credit card spending on luxury brands fell 5% in March and February year on year. Some market watchers had warned at the start of April about growing luxury fatigue and falling US consumer sentiment. Groups like LVMH, Kering and Richemont are expected to draw on their brand's pricing power to shield profits from tariffs. But investors worry shoppers who can afford $10,000 leather handbags and gold bracelets could tighten their purse strings against a darkening economic backdrop.
And with that, it's a wrap here on the Trump Card. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9. English news as it should be.
What is to the nines? In literal terms, it's perfection. But to us, it's not just a phrase, it's an attitude. One that starts at your desk and sends a statement to the world. To the nines is about taking charge. It's a way of life where every seam, every fold, is crafted with excellence. It's timeless elegance and uncompromising quality made for the corner office. It's the ideas that inspire redefining order and elevating the tabletop. To the nines, for the leaders of today and the visionaries of tomorrow.
वक़्फ़ में एक भी नॉन मुस्लिम नहीं आएगा.
Waqf bill was passed by Rajya Sabha. Opposition parties had challenged the legislation in the Supreme Court. Can Muhammad Yunus be trusted because he met Prime Minister Modi? West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee met thousands of teachers and educators. Tharoor said that it took 21 months for Bharatiya Janata Party to impose president rule in the state.
India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Very good evening. Thanks for tuning in to Unmissable. I'm Nabila Jamal, as always, taking you through a roundup of what's happening in India and around the world. Where we take you through our day to night top story, taking you through Tahavvur Rana, the man behind 2611, the conspirator, the man who plotted the attack, sitting far away, has finally come into India's custody. 17 years wait has ended. And then our deep dive story here on alcohol in theatres. How would you like the prospect? Well, seems like there's a lot of buzz around multiplex owners now attempting to get alcohol license to serve inside theatres. What could be the ramifications? And then finally, our viral watch. We take you through a techie who's confronted the bosses of Microsoft on the Gaza deaths. 50,000 deaths in Gaza. The lady there, Indian origin, slams Satya Nadella, Bill Gates and the top bosses there, resigns soon after. Taking you through all that and more, the headlines first. 2611 Mumbai terror attack mastermind Tahavvur Rana to be brought to India. He's already in Indian custody. Will be landing in a private jet. Questioning will begin thereafter. India ends transshipment facility for Bangladesh after Yunus backs Chinese economic role near northeast. China responds to Trump's 104% tariffs, retaliates with an additional 84% tariff on US goods, and in a move that surprises us, China reaches out to India saying India-China should fight back. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin chairs an all-party meeting to discuss further steps regarding the National Eligibility cum Entrance Test, NEET Test Exemption Bill. Amid Waqf protests, Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee urges members of the minority community to remain united, says Waqf will not be implemented in West Bengal. Big statement coming from her. And big face-off over the Waqf Act in Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. BJP legislators and Aam Aadmi Party MLA Mehraj Malik clash. There were initial reports that said the BJP members almost trashed Mehraj Malik for allegedly speaking about Hindus in a derogatory way. Row over Karnataka #1 in corruption remark by Chief Minister Siddaramaia's economic advisor. He later denies making any such remarks, blames past BJP's rule, saying it was the BJP who tainted Karnataka's image. Another Air India P-gate. Passenger urinates on a fellow passenger in a Delhi to Bangkok flight. Delhi's power demand peaks with rising temperatures. 5,029 megawatts demand on April 8th was the highest this year, basically referring to the heat wave that's hit the national capital, could very well cut across India. It's just the beginning, could get worse. Taking you through our top story tonight. India's 17 years of wait is finally over. After 17 long years, justice may finally catch up. Tahavvur Rana, the man who helped plan the deadliest terror attacks on Indian soil, is finally being brought back to face law. Here, he's accused of playing a central role in the 2611 attacks that left 175 dead, including 20 brave security personnel and 26 foreign nationals. A crime that shook the soil of this country, and now it's time for India to avenge 2611. Two high security jails, one in Delhi, another in Mumbai, have been quietly put on alert as the United States finally has given a green signal for Rana's extradition. In fact, we hear Rana is already with the Indian agencies. He's been taken into custody already. A 7-member team led by NIA IG Ashish Batra and DIG Jaya Roy, along with officers from RAW and the Ministry of External Affairs, have landed in the US. They, in fact, the last few days have been working extensively towards completing his extradition formalities. And finally, it's been a success. Because of the high-risk nature of this operation, Tahavur Rana is being flown back on a private jet under tight security. Once he lands in Delhi, the NIA will formally take custody and begin his interrogation at its headquarters. And after that, Rana will be moved to Mumbai on transit remand to face trial. India has waited for 17 years for. Now, Rana wasn't just an accomplice. I'll tell you why he's so important. He was the vital link between David Headley and Pakistan's ISI. Together, they mapped out Mumbai, recorded videos, picked the targets, did a complete recce on how to carry out those strikes in Mumbai. It was Rana's immigration firm, First World Immigration Services, that was used as a front for the reconnaissance. In fact, David Headley posed as a businessman and moved in and out of India using a US passport. According to the 2023 charge sheet filed by the Mumbai police, Tahavur Rana was in the city days before the attack, the 26/11 attack. He stayed at a 5-star hotel from November 11th to 21st and then took off before the strike. Police have also recovered emails from David Headley and Rana. In fact, both sharing emails, sharing information and directions and updates on how to move forward. That's David Headley, who's a Pakistani American who seems to be a key conspirator. He's in fact been convicted in a US court. Headley has pleaded guilty in a US court. He in fact was the one who exposed the entire operation and the links to Lashkar-e-Taiba's involvement here and the role of Pakistan's deep state. Rana's testimony, as per investigation, Tahavur Rana also has testified in the United States, and his testimony has also revealed key links to Pakistan. Now, for the first time, we get Rana on Indian soil. He gets to face the law right here in Indian courts. The aim of the attack was quite clear. The 26/11 attacks was done primarily to strike fear in India, down India's global image and to hit out at Americans and Israelis as well as Indians. We know that Pakistan, the deep state, Islamists look at Americans and Israelis as #1 enemies. And of course, the Pakistani hate for India. A 4-day siege that turned Mumbai into a war zone, from the Taj Hotel, the Oberoi Trident to the Nariman House and CST station. Now, 10 heavily armed terrorists from Lashkar-e-Taiba entered the city by sea, armed with automatic rifles and grenades. 9 were gunned down, except for Ajmal Kasab. Kasab was arrested. But the mastermind, like Tahavur Rana and David Headley, were sitting far away. They were the ones who orchestrated the entire thing. In fact, got these terrorists trained in Pakistan and were sent to Mumbai for the strike. Rana was one among them, key conspirator of 26/11. The return of Tahavur Rana is more than legal win here for India. It's a moment of reckoning. India has waited for 17 long years to bring this man to justice. That moment is finally here.
You all aware that the US Supreme Court rejected his plea. As far as the extradition of Mr. Rana is concerned, at this point in time, I don't have an update, but we'll provide you an update at the appropriate time.
देखिए, ये भारत के लिए बहुत बड़ी रणनीतिक विजय है कि तैमूर राणा को अब भारत आना ही पड़ेगा और भारत के कानूनों का सामना करना पड़ेगा। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ने बार बार कहा कि जिन्होंने भारत के साथ छल किया वो 7 समंदर के पीछे भी छिपे होंगे, तो मोदी सरकार उनको ढूंढ करके लाएगी और उन्हें हिंदुस्तान के कानूनों के अनुसार सजा दी जाएगी।
नहीं, वो तो सही है, जिसने आतंकवाद किया हो उसको कड़ी से कड़ी सजा मिलनी चाहिए। अब तो अमेरिकी अदालत ने कह दिया, उसने बहुत कोशिश की इस बात की कि उसको जो है किसी तरह से राहत मिल जाए, भारत न लाया जा सके, लेकिन भारत अमेरिकी अदालतों ने उसकी याचिका खारिज कर दी। उसको भारत आना पड़ेगा और कड़ी से कड़ी सजा उसके अपराध की मिलेगी।
One for justice in India of those who were killed on that horrific days. And second, it's a very good step, I think, in cooperation between America and India in terms of criminal elements, with transnational crime, terrorism. So it's a very good indication of the growing cooperation between the two countries on that. But first and foremost, it's that justice coming back, and with this, India will learn many things by interrogation of this gentleman.
All right, the Waqf bill has been passed, but seems like protests continue to escalate in different parts of the country. Let's take you through Jammu and Kashmir's assembly. The House witnessed huge scuffle and a showdown there, while the NC insisted on having a discussion on the Waqf bill. They wanted the adjournment to be announced by the Speaker. In fact, they wanted nothing and no other business to unfold in the Assembly House except for discussions on the Waqf. And that's when we saw huge scuffle that broke out between AAP's lone MLA, Mehraj Malik, and some of the BJP legislators. That's Mehraj Malik on our screens there. The clash broke out over Malik's demand for a debate on the Waqf Amendment Act of 2025. BJP MLA Vikram Randhawa accused Malik of making some derogatory remarks against Hindus. Randhawa responded and he said, and I quote, "We won't tolerate this, we will answer and respond to him in the House itself." So there were some reports that initially surfaced that the BJP MLAs, some of them, almost attacked and assaulted the AAP MLA.
हिंदुओं को गाली दी है, ये MLA बन के आगे कुछ भी करेगा, इसको नहीं शेयर करेंगे। इसने गालियां दी आज भी हिंदुओं को कि हिंदू तिलक लगा के पाप करता है, हिंदू तिलक लगा के चोरियां करता है। इसको बताएंगे आज। ये गाली इसने क्या दी? ये बोल रहा है जगह जगह कि हिंदू तिलक लगा के चोरियां करता है, हिंदू तिलक लगा के पाप करता है, हिंदू तिलक लगा के शराब पीता है। इसको बताएंगे हिंदू क्या क्या करता है।
Some of the very upset BJP MLAs there. In fact, the exchange was so heated, finally marshals had to intervene to separate the members and try and bring in some element of peace there. Speaker Kavinda immediately adjourned the House for 3 hours, but the storm did not end. Malik also locked horns with PDP MLA Wahid Para, accusing him of shielding mafia elements and of being party, basically acting AP and attacking him.
एसएसपी को जब बोला कहता आपको तमीज नहीं है, वो कौन होता मुझे? अरे उसका काम गेट के बाहर है, वो मुझे बताएगा, एसएसपी पे कौन? अरे आपने नहीं देखा बाहर का? अरे बाहर का तमाशा देखो, बाहर भीड़ कितनी।
Meanwhile, National Conference legislators, NC leaders continued their demand for a discussion on the Waqf Act, saying amendments hurt the autonomy of religious bodies. But Speaker refused to allow the debate, saying it wasn't part of listed business in the House. With repeated disruptions and no consensus in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly over Waqf, the Assembly finally adjourned for the day. And this was 4 days of deadlock there on the Waqf issue. It brings the chaos there to a close, along with the Jammu and Kashmir's Assembly session itself, which was supposed to be its maiden budget sitting. Waqf protests in West Bengal were far more violent and dangerous. Mamata Banerjee, the chief minister there, has promised that she will not implement the Waqf Act in West Bengal. A big statement to say, not too sure how much of that will hold good under the court and the rule of law. Fresh political storm that's erupted after the centre officially notified the Waqf Act. But Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal says that she is going to ensure that Waqf properties are protected. Speaking at a Jain community event in Kolkata, Mamata said that the Waqf Act will not be implemented in Bengal. A very clear statement that she made, assuring the gathering there that minorities and their priorities will be protected, urging communities not to fall for any kind of provocation. Basically hinting at, directly pointing fingers at the BJP, saying don't fall for their attempts to divide and rule. She's hit out at the timing of the law itself, citing violence in Murshidabad. She said, and I quote, "We have 33% minorities in Bengal. What am I supposed to do to protect them? I will and must protect them. Don't fall for any kind of divisive policies. Stay united. I will ensure Waqf properties are intact."
देखिए, आप लोगों को दिल में दुख हुआ है वक़्फ़ प्रॉपर्टी के लेके। आप भरोसा रखिए, बंगाल में ऐसा कुछ नहीं होगा जिसमें कोई डिवाइड एंड रूल होगा। आप लोगों ने ये मैसेज दीजिए कि सबको एक साथ में रह के बचना है, जियो और जीने दो।
There had been a law and order problem, stone pelting हुआ था, पुलिस का 2 गाड़ी जला दिया, and we had used all legal action. We have taken all legal action. 22 we have arrested 22 miscreants. उसमें से 8 को हम पुलिस कस्टडी में ले रहे हैं फॉर फर्दर इन्वेस्टिगेशन। केस हुआ है।
अरे बंगाल में जंगल राज तो एपीचमेंट पॉलिटिक्स के लिए हो रहा है, तुष्टीकरण का पॉलिटिक्स हो रहा है, इसलिए बंगाल में ये लोग कर रहा है। दूसरा प्रदेश में करने का मौका नहीं मिल रहा है। वहाँ पुलिस लॉफुल एक्शन लेता है, यहाँ पुलिस लॉफुल एक्शन नहीं लेता है ड्यू टू पुलिस मिनिस्टर है जो चीफ मिनिस्टर ममता बनर्जी।
Meanwhile, you also have Congress leader Rahul Gandhi slamming the Waqf Act, calling it an assault on the Constitution and freedom of religion. Remember, the Congress has also reached the Supreme Court fighting against the Waqf Act. Now, the Constitution and freedom of religion is being violated, says the MP of the Congress, Rahul Gandhi, speaking on the final day of the AICC meeting in Ahmedabad. Rahul Gandhi said the act undermines core constitutional values.
The BJP and the RSS are attacking our institutional framework, and they think that just because they are in power, they have huge amount of financial capacity that nobody is going to resist them. They are absolutely wrong. The Congress worker and the Congress party and the large mass of India's people are going to fight for this constitution and are going to defeat the RSS and the BJP.
All right, in the state of Telangana, BJP's MLA Singh he's basically got into legal trouble. Raja Singh, who is known for making hate speeches, has faced legal action by the Telangana government. Let me take you through what exactly the sections are. Raja Singh, first of all, who is known for his unfiltered and often provocative language, his public remarks there, knows no boundaries, frequently attracting accusations of hate speech or communal overtones. Known for that. Now, during the Ram Navami procession in Hyderabad, BJP MLA Raja Singh made several controversial statements. He's been called out for it. He advocated for transforming India into a Hindu Rashtra and proposed a march to Maharashtra to demolish the grave of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. Remember, this comes at a time when already you saw a riot-like situation in Nagpur over the same issue of Aurangzeb's tomb. Here is BJP MLA insinuating likely a comment like this could lead to tensions. Thankfully, it hasn't. But here is Raja Singh now facing legal action by the Telangana government. A case on the MLA has been booked on videos where he's heard making allegedly hate speeches. Police have said that they have collected videos as evidence. This MLA now faces Section 221 of the BNS along with 351 and 352, all sections that crack down on hate speech. Let's listen in.
मोदी काल में, योगी काल में अब आतंकियों के लिए कोई स्थान नहीं है। आतंक के लिए एक ही स्थान है, वो है पास भेजने का काम योगी जी और मोदी जी करेंगे। मेरे मित्रों, आज मैं उस बड़े बुलडॉग ओवैसी को कहना चाहूंगा कि जरा भोंकना बंद कर दे। क्योंकि अब वक्फ बोर्ड पर कानून बिल आ गया है, कानून पास हो गया है.
Remember, in a state like Telangana, political identities are often closely tied to their social and cultural narratives. Raja Singh, with this combative style of politics, has very well understood the far-reaching implications that his statements have. It is to be noted that despite several run-ins with the law and even his own party members basically despising what he says, he's been suspended from the BJP itself in the past. This man still continues to make communally divisive statements very brazenly, knowing well that his words resonates with his vote bank, and that's brought him electoral dividends as well. Karnataka's film star, now a murder accused, Darshan is now being investigated for receiving VIP treatment in prison. Let me take you through. Over the past 6 months, allegations had surfaced that Darshan, one of Kannada cinema's biggest stars, received royal treatment during his stay in prison. Now, speaking about celebrity privilege behind bars, it's not only at this point highlighting the systematic failure and lapse within the prison administration itself, but also shows how VIPs get to remain VIPs while behind bars as well. Darshan has now come under scrutiny for allegedly receiving special treatment while lodged in Bengaluru's Parappana Agrahara Central Jail. The Karnataka Home Department has now granted permission into the conduct of the jail authorities involved in the matter. After nearly 6 months, permission has been granted to interrogate the jail officials regarding VIP treatment that Darshan had received, where he was seen. In fact, images were out on that as well, smoking, drinking coffee, speaking on video calls, all inside prison. And that wouldn't have happened without an insider aiding him. Special investigation has been launched, questioning jail officers and staff members, recording their statements as well. The probe that's currently being carried out under the Prevention of Corruption Act highlights the seriousness of the allegations. So there are 3 cases registered against Darshan. One is related to Darshan allegedly receiving cigarettes inside prison. 2, involving the unauthorized use of a mobile phone within jail premises. And 3, focus on the role of prison authorities in facilitating these privileges to Darshan and investigating any potential corruption or collusion that may have happened. Authorities claim that they have obtained sufficient evidence indicating the involvement of certain officials in these incidents. In fact, police have stated that charge sheets in all 3 cases are expected to be submitted soon. The ongoing investigation is likely to expose the extent of misconduct and bring the implicated officials to justice. The broader issue here, of course, needs to be looked into is how celebrity status is blurring the lines of accountability and fair treatment. Jails are meant to be just that, jails. They are correctional facilities, but looks like for the VIPs, it's often a place away from home, seemingly out of public sight. People hoping that they are in a facility, a correction facility, so that they repent and regret if they've committed the crime. But here you have flagrant misuse of power. Let's hope the officials come down to actually implicating those responsible for it, so at least we as public can have some faith in the justice system. Now, Delhi seems to be one of the worst hit. Heatwave that's excruciatingly painful in different parts of India. The Met Department has warned temperatures across northern and central India, including Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and of course the national capital Delhi, could reach up to 40 degrees Celsius. The IMD has predicted extreme heat across Uttar Pradesh for April, May and June. So maximum temperatures are expected to stay above 40 degrees Celsius, especially in the Bundelkhand region. The situation will improve after 48 hours. So the next 2 days is going to be bad, real bad. There will be light rainfall in Himalayas for the next 4 to 5 days, but doesn't seem like that relief will pass on to the national capital. All right, shifting our focus to the Trump tariff escalation. Now, major escalation in the US-China trade war. President Donald Trump is set to impose a staggering 104% tariff on all Chinese imports starting Wednesday. The announcement has come from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. In fact, these new levies are on top of existing tariffs that were already in place before Trump began his second term. Let's hear it.
Right now, China is paying a 104% tariff. Think of it, 104%. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but they charged us for many items 100%, 125%. Many countries have. They've ripped us off left and right. Until they make a deal with us, that's what it's going to be. I think they'll make a deal at some point. China will. They want to make a deal. They really do. They want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get it started. Because they're proud people.
Now, meanwhile, Beijing has hit back at Donald Trump for 104% tariff. And it seems like China has also responded with additional tariffs. And while that said, China, of course, calling for India to unite so that India and China could fight back the United States. A very unlikely gesture.